Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Peter Podcast. I'm your host, reporter Taylor Clydesdale, and with me this week is Jenny Lanciault. Jenny is running for council in Town Ward in the October election, and today we're going to be talking about various topics, including the direction that growth in Peterborough should be taking.
I don't foresee us putting up 30-story apartment buildings. You know, the official plan kind of sets out guidelines for building heights. Based on different areas of the downtown. And, you know, you kind of can't have it all. We can't have more housing without building more housing. And if our only option is to go up, we're going to lose the streetscape that we have now. But that's okay, because we're going to gain a new streetscape. And I don't think it's fair to say that it's going to ruin the aesthetics of the downtown until we see it.
And we're also going to be talking about transportation and various other topics. So hope you enjoy the show.
So my name is Jenny Lanciault. I am a town ward candidate for the October municipal election. I'm 43 years old. I've lived in Peterborough for the last about 25 years. I'm originally from Kingston. I came here to go to school. I met a boy, and this is where I've stayed. He was raised in Peterborough. We have a daughter. She's 19. She's going into her second year at Queen's University. So we are empty nesters now. When my daughter left to go away to school, she told me that she thought it would be a good idea if I got a hobby. So I've always been interested in politics, particularly municipal politics. So here I am. The opportunity kind of presented itself within the year that she was away at school, and the timing just has worked out for me.
So what are your motivations behind being on council and making decisions for the future of not just your ward, but the rest of the city?
I think that I have a lot to offer from a business background. I think I work very well collaboratively with people. One of the things I want to focus on is kind of to stop dwelling on all of the conversations and roadblocks that have happened in the past with City Council and put a period and move forward. I'm ready to see some progress in Peterborough. I think it's time for Peterborough to grow into something a little bit bigger than what it is right now, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
You said you come from a business background. Maybe you can describe your background a little bit for people so that they know, what makes you a qualified candidate.
Sure. So my career originally started with the federal government. I worked in administrative management with Revenue Canada, as it was called at the time, for 10 years. That was a great experience. I worked with a great group of peoples, and I also worked around, legislation, and I worked with unions and policies and procedures. So it kind of gave me a good overview of working within parameters that you can't really do much about. At the 10-year mark, my entrepreneurial spirit kind of got the better of me, and I left my job at the federal government to start a small business with my amazing business partner. We ran a spa in East City for 10 years. I've said all through my campaign that Ashburnham Ward is probably my second favorite ward after Town Ward. So we did that for 10 years. Running your own business is a very different hustle than working for the federal government. We worked nights, you work every weekend. You're providing all of the services to our clients, but you're also doing all of the work in the background, paying the bills, paying salaries, doing payroll deductions, all of those types of things.
You would do a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything, exactly. Because if you don't do it yourself, you're paying somebody else to do it. And when you're a small business owner, it's a tough go making. It takes a lot of work to keep the wheels going round on a business. So the more you can learn to do on your own, the more money you put in your pocket at the end of the week or the end of the year. So we worked really diligently at learning how to do things on our own. We set certain benchmarks for ourselves, and at the end of 10 years, we had met all of those benchmarks, and we had gotten pretty tired of working weekends and physical work. So we were offered an opportunity to continue working together, but now we actually work in the construction industry.
Okay.
So I do project development and property management for a local construction company. We build large-scale commercial projects. We also have built 2 high-density residential apartment buildings, and then we have some commercial property that we look after as well. So When I started working in construction, I was glad that our employer hired for attitude and trained for skill because I knew nothing about it either. But over 4 years, when I look back on the projects that we've completed, I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and we've built some really beautiful things in the city. And it's also given me some insight into how planning and developing and working in conjunction with the city goes.
As an aside, I remember reading an article recently, and I can't remember where, that was basically that employers are looking more for soft skills, like, eagerness, work ethic, than hard skills.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to be experienced in that field, but if you have a solid work ethic,
That's right.
You can train hard skills. It's hard to train soft skills.
Yeah, I think if you have a capacity to learn and a willingness to take a risk, there's not a lot of jobs that most people can't learn how to do. The bottom line is, even if you make a mistake, the world's probably not going to stop spinning, so you can't be afraid to take those risks and try something new. And it's been a great adventure for me. I've learned a tremendous amount more about construction and stormwater management than I ever thought I would ever possibly know, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so you've worked in Canada Revenue Agency, or I guess Revenue Canada as it was.
Revenue Canada at the time.
You've been an entrepreneur and a small business owner.
That's
you work
right.
in administration right now. Did you say?
Well, I work in property management and project development, but
Sorry.
we do all of the administrative, like the accounting and the accounts payable, receivable, payroll. Plus, we look after all of the leasing of the apartment buildings and the commercial space.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of issues going on with Peterborough right now. We're going to dive into some of those later, especially when it comes to housing markets. So maybe you can speak more to that.
Sure.
But how does, your portfolio that you've developed over your life, how does that apply to the issues that Peterborough is facing right now and that it will be facing in the future as well?
Yeah. Housing is a huge concern in the city. I think sometimes what people maybe don't realize is that everything is a process. It's one thing to say we need more housing, but that's not going to happen overnight. First of all, you have to find an appropriate location to put the housing, which Peterborough has a huge shortage of available service land in the city. Then there's probably a whole year of permits and studies and planning that you have to go through working with the city before you put a shovel in the ground. And then there's the whole construction period after that.
And that's if the city doesn't say, okay, we want something
critical. Exactly. So it's not just as simple as, hey, we need to build more apartment buildings, or hey, we need more subdivisions. I think you have to be patient, you have to know that there's steps involved, and you just kind of have to be willing to work through those steps.
Okay. A little while ago, you had mentioned that something that you had wanted to see dealt with was roadblocks for city council. What did you mean by that comment about roadblocks?
What were you?
Oh, that was, I forget what that was in reference to. Okay, maybe I won't go back to that then if I can't even remember what it was in reference to. Okay. New question then.
You can edit that out.
But no, we'll leave it in. We'll leave in my horrible can't rememberingness.
That's okay.
But let's rephrase the question then. But what are some issues that you see that council is dealing with now that, if you were elected to council, that you would see, find ways to deal with them?
I think that, there's a lot of waiting for reports and sending things back to the city for reports. And I don't know if it's true or not. Obviously, I don't sit around the council table right now, but the optics are that it's not a very cohesive team right now, I think, which has also been some of the feedback that I've been getting when I've been out campaigning. And there comes a point where you have to make an educated decision and take a calculated risk. Mm-hmm. When you're an elected official, people elect you because they trust that you are an intelligent person and you're going to make a decision that you think is the right decision based on the information that you have at the time. You can read 10 different reports and have 10 different suggestions on how things need to be done. And at times, I think we kind of get mired down in we don't really like what that report says. Let's spend X number of dollars in X amount of time and get another report. And then when that comes in, we don't really like what that one says. Let's get another one. It seems like it's a long road to get anything accomplished.
And just in regards to the comment that you made about optics, something that I do hear often about council is that, too often votes end in 6-5.
Yes.
And that there are two camps on council that are responsible for those 6-5 votes. I've heard from some people that that's not a good thing, that, council needs to be more unified. I've heard from other people that 6-5 is not a bad way to end a vote. And it shows that, for an issue that is dividing the community, it makes sense that there's a reasonable division on council.
Right. That's right.
So, it can go either way on that. But do you see there as being a divide on council, that council isn't on the same page on too many issues?
I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, the votes that have been divided have been on the big issues, kind of like the PDI and the Parkway. I think it's great that it's a split vote. It shows that people are giving consideration to the issue. It shows that people have an opinion and they're not afraid to voice their opinion. I think that's what we want in a council. And it's just a vote. It's just business. It's nothing personal. You're never going to agree with everyone on everything. And it's okay if we don't agree. It's just business.
So how should councillors make their vote? And this is a question that I've asked a lot of candidates at this point, and I've gotten a few different responses. But, let's say that you have a decision on your plate, like the PDI sale or like the Parkway, where let's say you look at the numbers and you say, this is a decision that makes sense. And then the community comes out and they say, no, this isn't what we want, and we elected you to make a choice for us. Do you go back and say, well, here's the information that we have, I'm going to continue to vote this way? Or do I say, no, the people have spoken, they've said we don't want this, I'm going to change my mind and I'm going to not vote for this thing? And I know we're speaking in super hypotheticals here, but
I think it comes down to being an effective communicator. Part of the decision making, I'm sure, involves feedback that we get from people in our ward, from people in the city. But what people in the city or the ward don't also get access to is all of the information that's presented to the councillors when they're involved in negotiations with regards to something like the PDI or the Parkway. I think that all of it comes into consideration when you make your vote. The information that you're given, the offer that's put in front of you, the reports that you're being given that have numbers and actuals in them, as well as the personal opinions of people that are in your ward. All of that, I think, comes together to help you come to what your decision is going to be. But when it comes time to make that decision, for me personally, I'm going to have to listen to what my inner voice is telling me. I think I have pretty good intuition. My inner voice is pretty strong, and that would probably be what would be my driver when I made a decision on a vote.
And just in regards to what you said about, councillors having certain sets of information, because I have heard that from some councillors who, when they're defending their choice, they say, look, this is the information that we had.
That's right.
And not all of it is publicly available. And, some people's response, and, the follow-up question that I have is, well, why isn't that information available? If you are basing your decision off of information that is not available to the public, so the public can't understand your decision, or they can't reach the same conclusions for themselves, then why isn't that information out there? So should that information be out there? Anything that is used for a councillor to reach a decision, should all that information be out there? Or is it okay for that some information to be, just
like proprietary or...
Yeah, but,
I think it is okay for some of it to not be made public. The city of Peterborough is a business. In any business, you don't make all of your information available to the public. Not to mention, I'm sure it would be information overload to some extent. Plus, I don't know what sort of agreement, say, the city entered into with negotiations with Hydro when they were talking about the sale of PDI. There might have been some information that whoever you're negotiating with doesn't want put out to the public. I don't know. I think it would be important to say to the public that you elected me and you're going to have to trust that I've shared with you what I can share with you, and what I can't share with you I've used to make what I felt was the best decision at the time.
And, there's arguments to be made on both sides that, the information that's available to councillors should be completely available to people. And then there, like with the Hydro One sale, or with the sale of PDI to Hydro One, that it might be a legal thing that information can't be publicly released, or it's just that, because the deal is in such intense negotiations that it would be too early to release any information. Personally, as a journalist, I tend to prefer. I'm a more information is better, so I might be a little biased in that regard, but I can certainly understand both sides. But yeah, just in regards to some of these issues that people care about. Well, actually, let's take a short break.
Okay.
Refill on our water.
Sure.
And we'll come in and we'll talk about PDI, Parkway housing, and yeah.
Sounds good.
It'll be great. We are back on the Peter podcast, and we are back with, how do I pronounce your last name?
Lanciault.
Lanciault?
No, it's a tough one. Yes, Lanciault.
Oh, as long as nobody calls me Tyler, I think I'm happy with that.
I know, my husband was calling you Tyler, and I had to say to him, stop saying that, because then I'm going to call Taylor.
Yes.
Tyler.
I've had people on the podcast call me Tyler. I've exchanged email chains with people where my
name's right there.
Yeah, right there, and they called me Tyler repeatedly, so... but enough about me. Let's talk about you and your opinions.
Okay.
Because we are going to be talking about a couple of issues, including the Parkway. Now, we had talked a little bit during the break about the Parkway, and I had told you I'm pretty neutral on the Parkway.
Right.
Either build it or don't. And you had said something along the lines of...
I'm kind of the same vein of thought of you at this point. Either build it or don't. I would like to see it built. But after 70 years, 25 of which I've been in the city to hear about, I think it's time to make a decision and either make a decision and build the Parkway or take it out of the official plan and get on with things. We've thrown more money after this road that doesn't exist than most things in the city. Personally, what I would like to see happen, at the very least, I would like to see the expansion portion from Clonsilla to Medical Drive be built through there, so that will give us from the southern end of the city a thoroughfare road up to Park Hill Road. So at the very least we have a straight path, I guess, straight road up to that section of the city. I understand that it's Jackson Park that is the sensitive issue for people, and especially the B word, the bridge. People are very impassioned about that. I think that we could probably come to some sort of compromise if we've built the section, like I was saying, between Clonsilla and Medical Drive, and then come to some sort of compromise for the rest of it, whether it's the synchronized lights or the widening of Chemong Road. I don't know that we have to put a bridge over Jackson Park. It would certainly be the fastest and most effective way to get from one end of the city to the other, but I also can appreciate that people are pretty sensitive about that.
Now, the only problem is with the strategy of let's build just a portion or two portions of the Parkway is that the condition placed on the city by the Ministry of the Environment is, after exchanging information on the Parkway so many times, the city has basically been told you can't piecemeal the Parkway.
Right.
If you want to build any part of the Parkway, you have to do the full environmental assessment.
Right.
And that could cost, anywhere from $1 million to, I think the city had said, $6 million. And that's on top of the fact that the Parkway in and of itself is a $100 million project.
That's right.
So is it just getting too expensive to build any part of the Parkway? Can you do the environmental assessment and just say we're going to do this part and this part?
I think that perhaps maybe one of the ways that the new provincial government could work in our favor is the fact that it is a new provincial government. So would it be worthwhile going back to the table and having that conversation?
Okay.
With the new provincial government that is in place. The environmental assessment that needs to be done, it's a tremendous amount of money that needs to be paid to have that done. Is it worthwhile? I don't know. I'm not an environmental engineer. But at some point, somebody's got to make the decision. Either we're doing it or we're not doing it.
Okay. And, there's a lot of traffic studies out right now that are kind of in a stopgap between making a decision on the Parkway, looking at the synchronization of lights, looking at widening certain roads, active transportation, which includes expanding the city's cycling network. So we don't know what staff are going to come back after a couple of years and say. But, you said that you're supportive of building the section between the current existing Parkway in Tonopy Ward and Medical Drive.
At the very least.
At the very least.
Yeah.
So that would be the minimum that you would expect. So when it came to building the Parkway, sans the without the bridge over Jackson's Park. Is that something that you would be supportive of if you could do it?
Yeah, I would be supportive of that.
Okay.
For sure.
And
for sure. I think it's a good compromise. Like the pro parkway and the anti parkway are so like different polarities from each other that we need to find some way to kind of meet in the middle.
Okay.
Because there kind of seems to be the all or nothing camp and the absolutely nothing camp, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people in the middle vocalizing their opinions.
Okay. But the bridge over Jackson's Park, is that something that you would be supportive of? Or
Yeah, I would.
You would support a bridge over Jackson?
I would support a bridge over Jackson. Oh. You say that like you're...
Oh, yeah. I just say it because there's a lot of people who are supportive of everything but the bridge over Jackson's Park. It's a very contentious issue.
It is a contentious issue, and I think there's a lot of different variables that have to go into making that decision. Environmental and the cost and just the impact on the community and the impact on the park. There's a lot of different variables that have to go into that. But right now, just knowing what I know about the parkway, and certainly not that I know a ton about it, I would be in favor of the bridge over Jackson's Park.
Okay. And just in regards to what if the city staff come back and says, look, it's just simply too restrictive, cost prohibitive, timeline-wise, it would take far too long to build the parkway in any way, shape, or form. What then?
So then my question back to then is, okay, then what's the solution?
Okay.
What's the solution to our traffic problems, the congestion, the cut-through traffic, the wear and tear on our roads? What is the solution?
And do you have any ideas on how to do that without the parkway?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
To me, the parkway seems like the quickest point from A to B in accomplishing what the parkway was originally set out to accomplish, which was a thoroughfare from the south end of the city to the north end of the city.
But if that doesn't get constructed, then you're open to ideas for how to improve traffic flow in Peterborough?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have to do something. I know people have said, well, traffic is subjective. We don't live in Toronto. It's not like we're sitting on the DVP. But if you're waiting for emergency services to come to your home and they're sitting on the bridge at Park Hill Road, waiting through 3 or 4 lights because there's no room for cars to get out of the way, it's a problem for you.
But add, in I don't know how many years it's going to take to get to this point, but add 10,000 extra cars to the road.
Exactly.
Add 20,000 extra cars
Exactly.
to the road.
We've got 2 brand new subdivisions that are slated to go in. We have the highway that's connecting up to the 115 in 2020, the 407 that's coming. Our population is projected to grow exponentially. We're going to have more cars. That's just the bottom line. And our streets can't handle the cars that we have now.
Okay. Moving on to the next issue is PDI. It's been a fairly contentious issue for a lot of people in this community because, there's a lot of people that showed up at public meetings to tell the city we don't want to sell the distribution arm of our utility. What are your thoughts on the sale for $105 million to Hydro One?
My thoughts are, like I was expressing earlier, I am trusting that the people that I elected to represent me at City Council made the best decision that they made on that issue, given the information that they were given. $105 million in my world is a tremendous amount of money. It's too big of a number to ignore. I have to just trust that they made the right decision. We already know that we haven't had all of the information made available to us as what made up the offer. So I'm just trusting that they made the right decision.
Okay. And now how that money, which will probably be about $55 million in revenue for the city once that's finally completed, once that deal is completed, there's a question of how that money is going to be spent. Originally, it was going to be reinvested into new generation projects. Some of those projects did end up being canceled by the new provincial government. So it's kind of a question right now of, I'm sure that money can be reinvested back into Peterborough utilities, but there's also a fairly lengthy list of capital projects that the city can be investing in.
Yes.
There's also, operational costs. So how do you think that the money from PDI should be spent?
I'm not sure that it should be spent on operational costs. There's budgetary dollars that are set aside for those already. There's some capital projects that I think, would be nice to to see. One of them, because it's in town ward, and secondly, because I think it's a necessity, is the Brock Mission. That was a project that was shelved because it came in quite a bit over what the original budget was planned for that. In my mind, that would be a good use of money.
Use the PDI sale money to build the new Brock Mission,
A little bit.
Okay, anything else that you'd like to see?
I think, in investing it and getting a return on our investment. So, like, to go out and spend $55 million all at once on capital projects, it kind of seems like a waste of money. I think it's money that would be well invested. And then, every year, every couple of years, we have X number of dollars coming in for those investments. What are some of the nice to haves in the city?
Okay. And I think there's a lot of projects that are going to be costing a lot of money in the city eventually. And one of those is, for example, the new Memorial Center replacement. Potential new Memorial Center replacement, but from what the consultants are saying and what city staff is saying, it sounds like we're going to need a new facility.
Building, a new facility.
And that's going to cost a lot of money. So, how do we afford to pay for something like that?
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of money. It's something that it's in the budget. It's something that has been budgeted for over the past couple of years. Perhaps, we're having this money from the PDI, so the money that comes back on the investments from that, we're going to be receiving revenues from the casino that Peterborough has never had in the past. We could maybe also look at a private investor for an arena. There's lots of cities who have engaged into contracts with private investors to help build arenas. It's a lot of money for a city to shoulder all on their own.
We got our own Rogers Center here in Peterborough.
We could, exactly. Exactly.
And so other than that, just talking about, and I know you have specialty in housing, but and we've talked a little bit about the housing crunch, and that there's not a lot of land left for Peterborough to build new commercial housing.
New anything, really. Yeah. High density housing.
High density housing,
really.
Industrial land. So what do we do?
Lots. In my ward, town ward, there's no land to build houses. So our option is to build up. We have to start thinking about building vertically, building more high density housing, apartment buildings, work-live situations, commercial on the ground floor, residential above it, just like all sorts of other cities have done. We haven't really explored that in the downtown. There's not a tremendous number of apartment buildings. There's City Center and Brock Towers, but really beyond that, there isn't a large number of high density housing available in the downtown, and I think that's what we need to start looking at in the future, is building up.
And I know, speaking from someone who actually lives in town ward, the fear of people who live there is that they don't want to see downtown Peterborough become 30 stories skyscrapers, and then the downtown skyline is ruined. And what makes Peterborough the smallest city in Ontario, which I don't actually know if that claim is true, but that small town city feeling that we have is ruined because you've got skyrises.
Yeah. I don't foresee us putting up 30-story apartment buildings. The official plan kind of sets out guidelines for building heights based on different areas of the downtown. And, you kind of can't have it all. We can't have more housing without building more housing. And if our only option is to go up, we're going to lose the streetscape that we have now. But that's okay, because we're going to gain a new streetscape. And I don't think it's fair to say that it's going to ruin the aesthetics of the downtown until we see it. Okay.
But right now, another thing that we're looking at is low-income housing, and the fact that, a lot of the new housing development that's happening, while there is mixes of different housing styles in there, right now we are at a shortage of low-income housing in Peterborough, and it doesn't really look like any new builds are going to be accommodating that market.
No.
So how do we do that?
I think that the city needs to engage in some discussion with some developers. We need to encourage developers to come into the city to start building some low-income housing and to make it a relatively seamless process for those developers.
Mm-hmm. So you come from a development background.
A little bit, yeah.
Are developers interested in building low-income housing? Is it worth the bang for their buck to be able to do that work?
Taylor, that's probably the number one point why you don't see a lot of people getting into the low-income housing. It's a business, and it's not great return on your investment is the bottom line. And even as a landlord or a property owner, you don't have a lot of rights as a landlord. So it's not just as simple as, oh, I'm going to build this building and I'm going to have 100 apartments that I can rent out. It's the, and what now after that? Somebody still has to manage that building. You still have to maintain that building. You still have to rent it. All of the stuff that goes along with having high density residential buildings. It's not just as simple as come in and build a building and roll out of town. It doesn't really work like that.
So is it a case of incentivizing developers to go in and build low-income housing, or what would it be then?
Absolutely. I think we need to look at waiving development fees. We need to look at different property tax assessments. The amount of money that goes into developing a project before a shovel even goes into the ground, it was shocking to me. It really was.
Another case that I look at is that a lot of the redevelopment that's happening in the downtown area that I see, while it's great that places are being redeveloped, if you look at the places that are being redeveloped, it's places where they're not that great places. They're kind of falling apart. But they're also places with low rent. And so what I see and what housing advocates have told me is that when you have places that are redeveloped, it takes those low-income residents and it pushes them out of the downtown.
So it gentrifies the area.
Exactly. And, maybe that's the goal of the city. I don't know. But what it is ending up doing is that, people who can't afford to live in these areas that are increasingly becoming more high-income, middle-income area, they're being pushed out of where those services are that they require. So is that something that we do, or push the low-income people out of the downtown, or do we try to make it so that there's more low-income development happening in the downtown?
I think we need to work on having kind of like a mixed usage area in the downtown core. Some low-income housing, some high-income housing, a little bit of in between, some commercial property. We can all live together. It doesn't, I'm not a huge fan of compartmentalizing housing within a city. Like, this is the low income area of the city and this is the high income area of the city. I don't think that does a lot for the overall economic value of a city.
But just in terms of optics as well, if you look at the downtown, there's the image that, the city wants to have all the middle high income people downtown because that's where they spend money and that's what the businesses want as well. So do you manage the needs of the businesses, which is to have people downtown who spend money, and the people who are, in lower income brackets where they need housing and they want housing in the downtown, especially because it's,
handy, they can walk and it's convenient.
Exactly. You don't need public transit, you don't need a car, but there's nothing in the downtown for them right now, or at least there's a reducing amount of housing downtown for them.
It's frustrating to me as a property manager when I see landlords and property owners that aren't maintaining their building. It shouldn't matter whether you are renting out low income or geared to income apartments, or whether you're renting out high income apartments or higher rents. It shouldn't matter. Your building should look nice. It is a representation of you. It is a representation of your business. And the amount of rent that somebody can afford to pay shouldn't be reflected in the state of the building that they look in. It's in the building owner's best interest to keep their building in good repair. So I don't think it's fair that people assume, well, because you live in low income housing, you have to kind of live in a cruddy looking building or building that has subpar rental space in it.
Okay. So ideally, these places that are cruddy now that they rent for lack of a better term,
yes.
They can be redeveloped, but those spaces can be continued to be rented to that low income bracket.
Well, you don't have to rent out the 900 or 1,000 square foot apartment. Can you take 2 apartments and make them into 4 apartments? So you're renting out a smaller square footage. People live in larger cities and are paying, $400,000 and $500,000 in Toronto for 400 square foot condominiums. Right now the buildings downstairs and some of the floors, there's 2 apartments per floor. Well, could they be 4 apartments per floor?
Okay. We're just about to run out of time right now, so I just want to leave it with you. We've talked about a lot of topics right now, but is there anything that we may have missed or anything that you want to add?
I think we've pretty well covered it all. As far as my town ward goes, one of the projects that's important to me, maybe because I work in construction and building, is, property standards, and we just kind of touched on it a little bit. And there's all this talk about wanting our downtown to be prosperous and wanting it to invite businesses to operate in the downtown core. And I think you kind of have to dress for the job that you want. So if we want to look like we're a vibrant downtown, then our buildings need to represent that, and we need to be dressed like we're ready to receive company. So property owners that have let their buildings fall into a state of disrepair, that are boarded up, that have graffiti on them, that's our downtown core, and that should be unacceptable. It's not fair for other building owners and business owners that are trying to make a living downtown and their buildings are looking beautiful. They're going out of their way to create this lovely facade and this nice space for people to go. And right next door is this building that's been allowed to fall into a state of disrepair. I think it's important that we start enforcing the property standards in the downtown core and make our downtown look as beautiful as it can be. We have beautiful architecture downtown. We have property owners and business owners that are invested in the downtown core and are doing beautiful things downtown. Ashburnham Realty is one of them. Everything that they touch, it looks beautiful. I would love it if they could just, start at the top of George Street and work their way down. That would be great. But they're kind of setting the bar as far as I'm concerned, and other business owners as well. But they're kind of setting the bar, and I think that kind of needs to light a fire under the property owners that aren't meeting that bar right now.
All right. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
And for everyone else, we're going to keep covering our municipal election candidates. So we will see you again soon.
Thank you.